I'd like to introduce Liz Shercliff as our next speaker for you, and I've brought some of her books up to the front that are on the bookstall. She's worked with Matt Allen to do The Present Preacher. We have Preaching Women, Gender, Power and the Pulpit. And then together with Kate Bruce, they have been working through all of the women in the Bible, where they appear in the lectionary, and how you could possibly preach on them. And there's some fantastic sermons in here from both, sermon ideas from both Liz and from Kate. So do have a look at those. Liz, welcome.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Before I start, I do want to acknowledge all the work that Sarah's done to bring this conference to the south, and to thank Lucy for her support in doing that, and Bishop Sarah as well for being here today. I thought I would give you a little potted history of the conference. It will be potted, so if you don't like history, don't worry. About 14 years ago, I was asked by the then editor of the Preacher magazine, as we were walking through Berkeley Square actually, did I think that women preached with a different voice? And I said yes. So he said, will you write a feature article about that then? So I did some research, and I spoke to about 60 ordinands as I did the research, all sorts of ordinands. And one woman said a comment that stuck with me and kicked off my doctoral research and this conference and many of the books as well. And she said this. She said, I was a senior academic, but in ordination training, I feel my voice has been taken away from me and I've been taught to preach like a man. Hence the books. I've been taught to preach like a man, she said. And then 9 years ago, I was at a dinner, one of those dinners where you eat something and then somebody talks. And John Chalmers, who was then rector of the Church of Scotland, said that he believed that the next 10 years would be about gender justice. And we're 9 years into that decade. And he said that gender justice issue would be between white, middle-class, cisgendered men and everybody else. And it feels at this moment as though everybody else is losing, as we look at what's happening politically and elsewhere. But I am encouraged, because I like to read what's actually in the Bible rather than what people tell us is in the Bible. And I hope you've read Lucy and Samuel's letter to the Church Times yesterday, and if you haven't, read it. But they address the issue of how do we then read the Bible. And I think we read it seriously, and we find those people that Bishop Sarah was talking about, those people who we don't generally hear from. Let's not bother about all the big, strong men like King David and all those people. Let's look for the stories of the little women who seem not to matter and yet have so much to tell us. And that's what the two Out of the Shadows books try to do. I think there's a danger that the women that we look at in Scripture, we treat them a bit like those women who went on the Blue Origin space flight, which was billed as a triumph for feminism. Actually, I think that was the death of American feminism. For two reasons. First, at least one of the women got there because of a relationship with a man, Jeff Bezos' fiancé. And second, because Katy Perry came out with this very profound statement: space is finally going to be glam. And they all thought about which mascara and which lipstick they should wear while they're in space. They're not the real women that the Bible talks about, as far as I know. And I want to look at those real women. So today, I want to look at three, mainly because I just liked them when I was writing the books. They really kind of had something to say. So I'm indulging myself a little bit, and I hope you enjoy what I'm going to say. I want to look at Lot's wife. She gets blamed, doesn't she? You might remember the story. She's severely judged. First of all, she's so insignificant that she doesn't get mentioned until most of the action in the story is done. She doesn't matter enough. But then, conversely, as often happens with women, they don't matter until the story's done, and then something goes wrong and it turns out to be all their fault. And so she gets blamed for the fact that she's turned into stone. You might remember the story. Lot, the nephew of the great patriarch Abraham, let's hear it for the blogs, lives in the city of Sodom. And one evening, as he's sitting in the city gate, these strangers come along and he offers them overnight accommodation. And that evening, the men of the city of Sodom, young and old, all the people to the last man, surround the house and demand that Lot sends out his visitors so that we may know them, gang rape them. And Lot goes out to talk to them, closing the door behind him. That's an important detail. Closing the door protects the guests. But when the mob isn't satisfied, what does Lot say? Right? It's chilling. Lot says, I have 2 daughters who haven't known a man. Let me bring them out to you and do as you please with them. That's chilling, isn't it? Horrible. And the mob refuses because they want these visitors. And then they start calling Lot racist names and trying to force their way into the house. So these visitors, presumably they're angels of some sort, pull Lot back inside, strike the crowd blind, and then tell Lot to get out of the city. And then it all gets a bit interesting. Lot goes to warn his sons-in-law. The city's going to be destroyed, we need to go. And they laugh and say, no, that's not going to happen anytime soon. They're going to stay, thank you very much. And Lot doesn't take, he's seen all this stuff, right? He's seen the crowd struck blind. He doesn't take it seriously because he refuses to go. He's still there in the morning. So he must have thought, surely it can't be that bad. Maybe it's a bit like us when we don't heed the warnings, when we don't speak out about some of the things going on in our own society or what's happening in America at the moment. Maybe that was what he thought. It can't be that bad. But then in the morning, he's told, run and don't look back. But still Lot won't go. He wants to negotiate. He's told to go to the hills, somewhere completely different. What he wants to do is go to another city. He doesn't want to see much change. He'd rather keep things as they are. And then eventually they run, sulfur rains down on the city, and the city's destroyed. And the traditional story from then on is that Lot's wife had been told by God not to look back. She disobeyed, and as a result she gets turned to salt. Her own fault, right? There's no suggestion in the scripture, though, that this is actually God's doing. It's the result of looking back. So what was it that she saw when she looked back? What was it that petrified her? Leading the way ahead was her heroic husband, the one who'd offered up his own daughters to the mob in order to save his male guests, and the one who dithered when he was asked to leave immediately, the one who refused to go to the hills but wanted to go to another city, keep things normal. He's who was ahead of her. Her home was being destroyed, as were her married daughters and their husbands. And I think that what she saw when she looked back was no one. She was alone. She was isolated. She was without protection. In the rabbinic tradition, this woman is called Idit, which means witness. And I think it's what she witnessed that petrified her. First, she saw the effects of pernicious male pride. Lot would not give up his guests to whom he had offered hospitality and protection. But he would give up his virgin daughters, because giving them up wouldn't harm his reputation. Edith saw that she didn't matter. She was about to leave her home, her family, her neighbours, without a backward glance. That's not even humanly possible, I don't think. And finally, she saw Lot's reluctance to change. As she looked forward, I think she saw that nothing was going to be any different. And when she looked back, there was nobody behind her who cared about how she progressed. She witnesses firsthand the corrosive effects of a patriarchal system and its commitment to the hierarchy. She witnesses firsthand the aloneness of being the woman at the back. And that's what petrifies her. That's what trauma is. If Edith was a woman who had no one behind her, the next person I want to introduce you to is Tamar. There are two Tamars. I'm going to talk about both of them. This one is the one who was related to King David. She looks like the one who's made it, especially looking back at the women who went into space a few weeks ago, because her father's great and powerful, her mother's high-ranking, she's a valuable asset. She's beautiful even. She's introduced in that way what matters, we're told. She's sister to King David's son, and she's beautiful. Two assets that most women need, apparently. She has a half-brother named Amnon, and we're told that he falls in love with her. But listen to the language of that love. He was so tormented that he made himself ill, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to do anything to her. Does that sound like love to you? In the end, he shares this fixation with his friend, Jonadab. We'll see in the next story too how male friendships, the kind of Oxbridge relationships that Bishop Sarah alluded to earlier, we'll see how powerful they are in determining the way things are going to be and in subjugating women. Because Jonadab, this mate of Amnon's, doesn't give him a slap and tell him to get over himself. Is that a northern expression? You know what that means, don't you? Yeah. Instead, he helps him hatch a plan to get what he wants. There's no question that because he wants this, he should have it. Nobody says, no, that's wrong. It's just, let's get you what you want. Let's get you what you think you need. And so the plan is to pretend to be ill and ask his and Tamar's father to send Tamar to his room, do a bit of cooking, give him some cakes. And David, this great king, who himself has a track record of raping women, doesn't hear any alarm bells. He simply sends his daughter to Amnon's rooms. And Tamar does as she's told. She takes dough, she makes cakes, she bakes them, she sets them before her half-brother. But he refuses to eat, sends everybody else away, and asks Tamar to bring the food into the bedroom, which she does. And perhaps, like many abused women, she trusted her soon-to-be abuser. Amnon grabs hold of her and tells her, "Lie with me, my sister." She appeals to his honour. This isn't done in Israel, we don't behave like that. And his compassion. Where could I carry my shame? But, the Bible says, being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Having set a trap designed by his friend, Amnon brutally rapes Tamar in his room. The scene's heartbreaking. Once again, once he's sated his appetite for her, Amnon dismisses her. Get out. Tamar pleads for mercy. Where have we heard that before this year? Have mercy, Mr. President, remember? Sending me away is worse than what you've already done, she says. But when she will not go, Amnon has her taken away. He despises her so much, he cannot even call her by her name. And the original, the Hebrew says, he tells the servant to take this thing away from me and bolt the door after her. Tamar goes away in tears, robes torn as a sign of distress. Eventually, her brother Absalom hears what's happened. Brother. His response? Don't take it to heart. He's your brother after all. Her father David hears about it and he's very angry. Oh, good. But wouldn't punish his son Amnon because he loved him, for he was his firstborn. Tamar is alone, really alone. No one will stand with her. No one will seek justice for her. And then 2 years later, Absalom takes revenge, mafia style. He invites Amnon to a party where he instructs his servants to kill him. It's like one of those Italian mafia films. And then when Absalom becomes the king, he shows his power by publicly raping his father David's wives. Male pride protects the abuser first. Excuse me. And then demonstrates the male power by abusing yet more women. Violence perpetrates violence. Excuse me. Patriarchal power is supported by the isolation of women. This is a hay fever cough. There's a contemporary litany of similar events. A long line of Christian leaders promoted, prayed for, and blessed the new President of the United States. It took a brave woman bishop to ask him to show mercy. Excuse me. But I don't want to finish. I've got some water. I'm not going to finish on a hopeless note. Let me introduce another Tamar who I came to respect and even admire as I wrote about her. This is the Tamar from Genesis. She's Judah's daughter-in-law. You might remember Judah. He was one of the brothers who hated Joseph of the multicolored coat fame. They hated him so much that when their father sent him out with a packed lunch to them, they decided to kill him. But Judah stops them, not by appealing for mercy, but by appealing for profit. When the murder suggestion is made, Judah asks, what profit is there in that? Let's sell him. So they do. Soon after that event, Judah moves to Canaan to live near some influential Adullamite men. One of them's called Hira. And they seem to be close friends. Hira furthers Judah's prospects by introducing him to another man, a rich man. His name's Shua, which means opulence. Judah, we're told, sees Shua's daughter and takes her. In fact, the Hebrew tells us he takes her and enters her again and again. She has a son in verse 3, she has a son in verse 5, she has a son in 3, 4, and 5. All this, of course, is a sign of Judah's virility and indicates God's blessing on him. You might see it as a relationship between two powerful men being cemented by the transaction of a woman's body. In verse 6, Judah again sees a woman and takes her. This time, it isn't for himself, but for his son. We'll call him Son 1 so we can keep the story a bit more simple. Son 1 fails to produce a son, so God kills him. Tamar's passed on, according to the Levirate law, to Son 2, who refuses to produce a son for economic reasons, because the son would take over Son 1's share of the inheritance, and Son 2 would miss out. So Son 2 refuses to produce children, and God kills him too. And now, because of Tamar, God has killed, notice how the woman gets the blame, because of Tamar, God has killed 2 of Judah's sons. He doesn't want to give away the third one. So instead of marrying his third son to Tamar, Judah sends her, as an engaged woman, back to her father's house, which means she isn't free to marry anybody else, and she has no income. But Tamar is a strong, wise woman. She doesn't give in. She waits her time for justice. Even when she couldn't see it coming, she lives in hope, presumably, and waits for the opportunity. Eventually it comes. Judah's wife dies, and after a decent period of mourning, he goes off with his friend to the sheep-shearing festival, which was known to be a licentious and bucolic occasion. When Tamar finds out where Judah and Hira are heading, she hatches a plan. She dresses as a prostitute and sits down by the side of the road. And that's all it takes. Once again, Judah sees a woman and takes her. English Bibles are a bit coy, but the Hebrew is straightforward. Excuse my French, but Judah says, "Let me fuck you." Power and privilege speaking to the powerless. But Tamar's really smart. She negotiates a price and its guarantee. And it's the guarantee that's important. Judah hands over his seal and staff and cord, which is the equivalent of handing over his passport, driving license, and credit card. He's so confident in his own power that he doesn't feel the need to hide his identity. So presumably Hira, the other guy, is waiting around for Judah to finish his business, and then they continue on their way for the boozy weekend. When they get home, of course, Judah has a blinding revelation that his passport, driving license, and credit card might be quite useful to have. So he sends Hira off to find the prostitute, and of course, she's nowhere to be found. And then, this is interesting, I think. What Judah says is, "I've been daft," or "I'm going to be a laughingstock." He says to his friend, "We will be a laughingstock." He doesn't take any responsibility himself, but shares it generously with somebody who actually wasn't involved in the actual act. Now, 3 months later, Judah is told your daughter-in-law Tamar has prostituted herself. Notice that when the woman apparently belongs to no man, it's her who is at fault. No other explanation is considered. Seemingly without a moment's hesitation, Judah pronounces the sentence. There's no mercy, no fear of contradiction, no reference to the law of his own people. He just decides she is to be burned. This is a great moment for Tamar to return Judah's goods to him, and she uses it. She is pregnant by the owner of these things: the passport, the driving license, the credit card. Judah rescinds his sentence and admits his wrongdoing in not marrying his third son to Tamar, but not in any of the other things. The stories of these 3 women, Edith, Tamar, and Tamar, take place against a backdrop of a patriarchal system where the women are to be controlled, possessed, and exploited. Edith is petrified when she realizes that she's alone. Tamar is shamed and dismissed as making a fuss. But the Tamar in Genesis wins some kind of justice. From somewhere, Tamar gains confidence and challenges the patriarchal domination. And I'm going to hang a lot on 4 words here in this story, but I think they're significant. They come at the beginning of Genesis 38:13. And they say this: when Tamar was told. You see, I think somebody told Tamar, and that's how she managed to hatch her plan. I think somebody knew that what had happened to Tamar was wrong. And I think somebody encouraged Tamar to look for justice. When Idit looked behind her, there was nobody there. When the first Tamar looked alongside her, there was nobody there. But this Tamar, the Tamar who gets some kind of justice, had allies. People who'd seen what had happened and know that justice needs to be done. Tamar wasn't alone. Well, in my research, being made to feel alone is one of the things that most ordinands I spoke to said about their training. And quite a lot of women vicars too. I feel alone. I didn't realise it wasn't just me. I'm just checking the time because we need to finish it in time to take a photograph. So in my research about the Church of England and the women's experience in the Church of England, that was the phrase that came up. I thought it was just me. And several of my participants described the experience of ministerial training as traumatic. One of the questionnaires, in fact several of the questionnaires used words like bullying, almost abusive, and one woman writes, I was afraid to step out of line because they have the power over you. Another respondent said, I was afraid of saying anything in case I didn't get a curacy and I'd already given up my job. And in a conversation group that I ran, one group commented that during ministerial formation, there was an atmosphere of fear. Most of these feelings stem from the first comments that I cited, that many of my participants felt alone. I think there are 2 reasons for this aloneness. First, there's a lack of women on the staffs of training institutions. And second, there's a lack of honesty about the kind of women ministers who were going to be licensed and ordained and the kind of ministry that we're going to be ordained into. Karen, who I'm going to introduce later, and I know that there was a woman in a theological college who asked why all of the books in the New Testament module were written by men. And the answer she was given by the tutor was that women don't write books about the Bible. 2 more quotes from my research offer a potentially hopeful perspective. We need ways of building our confidence together. And we need to know that we're not alone. We need to journey with others. My conclusion from my research is that if women's experiences of ministry are different from men's, and they are, because we're alone during training and in ministry, the system makes us feel it's just us quite often, and some of those that we minister with. If women's experiences of ministry are different from men's, a one-size-fits-all approach to training will not do. Women need spaces that make being felt alone impossible. The women involved in my research have clearly said that ministerial training can feel traumatic, shaming, and dismissive. Those who are already in ministry said they'd not been prepared for work in the church as it is, and they felt alone. I think making people feel alone is a powerful strategy to make people shut up. And as a resistance strategy, as a way of building confidence and allowing women to be sure that we're not alone, I propose spaces like this one are really important. The second Tamar stands out from Edith and the first Tamar, not because she wasn't traumatized, she undoubtedly was. Not because she wasn't isolated or discredited, she certainly was. But because someone told her, because she wasn't alone, because she must have had at least one friend, and that gave her confidence to resist and to overcome. Sometimes the models that we need to draw courage from are not the beauties, not the compliant, not the saintly, but the marginalized, the bold, and the resistant.